Intermodal Development at the Agency of Transportation. I have the longest title, and that includes things such as the transit group that is within my division, which works with our state's transit providers and their funding schemes. The rail group, which also is associated with aviation. We have 10 state airports over 5 miles of railroad. You have railroads running through your community, and an airport nearby. And I spend a lot of time in the legislature, where I work very closely with Jacka White, who is not only with Efficiency Vermont, but she is on the House Transportation Committee. And so she's a great resource for us here. And Mark Anders, who's with the Bennington County Regional Commission as a transportation, you maybe have already met. And back here, I work a lot on vehicle electrification and transportation efforts related to carbon reduction. So it's great to have so many experts here, and many of whom we've met already this evening. So we're going to talk about what kind of thoughts you folks have related to transportation and transportation and energy. But let's, sort of keep the conversation as broad as you would like to, in terms of thoughts around, personal transportation resources and options, community transportation resources and options, and we basically can capture any input you have this evening to provide to the steering committee, who will sort of help flush out a direction we might want to take with transportation enhancements here in Dorset. And you are in a unique position where you are a rural community, but located pretty close to a hub location of Manchester. And so I suspect that that folks have varying travel corridors that they operate within and networks that they associate. So what I'm going to do now is just open it up for anybody to put forward ideas. If you have sort of clarifying questions, we can address those as well. So the floor is yours. Yes.
Sort of one question of thought, and I think for those people who have businesses, especially in Dorset and Manchester, and I don't know exactly how this should go, but many of the employees come from New York State.
Okay.
There's a tremendous amount of traffic through Dorset because they're going to some of the larger employers or smaller employers, on a daily basis, 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning, and the same thing going the other way. And I know most of these bus services, quite honestly, need a lot of funding, don't ever come close to breaking.
Great.
I'm just wondering, and again, unfortunately, you're talking about New York State people in many cases, but not all. Many are from both Paulette or Rupert or that kind of thing. If that might be one of the few routes that a smaller vehicle, instead of have to get picking on the kind of vehicles that you have running for your routes. Otherwise, there are 16, 18 passenger vehicles that are used in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
They're very fuel efficient. They can take that kind of people and move them on a regular basis. I'm just wondering if that could ever be considered.
So I think that was a really good point. I'll just sort of paraphrase because the room is fairly noisy. Could we capitalize on the fact that we have a lot of interstate commuters coming from parts of New York State, traveling through Dorset to maybe Dorset or Manchester on a daily basis as part of our workforce, and can we coordinate on that? And I would just, that's a great one to capture and a great one to follow up on in terms of energy reduction and congestion reduction too on your roadways and wear and tear on your local roadways. We do work across state boundaries with our transit services. I think a great example of that is the Amtrak bus service that we now have between Manchester, Bennington, and going to Albany, New York to get folks there. So working across state lines is doable, and particularly when we have a focused workforce opportunity, we do a lot of work with major employers, and so let's get that on the list as something to explore potentially. Yes.
I think for many of us, I live in Dorset, I work in Bennington
Yep.
at the museum. The public transit that's available picks up at the wrong place, drops off at the wrong place, and just doesn't meet our needs.
Yep.
Our best solution there is to use the most efficient vehicle possible.
Yep.
And if there are people who are going in the same direction and you can offer them a ride, wonderful. But there's nothing in the works anywhere to organize that.
Right.
Some of it's doable, some of it, I think it's a pipe dream, to be perfectly honest.
Yep. So in terms of note-taking, capturing the idea that somehow connecting more community-based and micro-transportation resources that serve the actual needs of the folks that live here in Dorset and where they may work or need to go for community resources. And I think there are definitely examples. Montpelier is working on a microtransit project right now to figure out how to maybe leverage smaller transit vehicles that pick up not in a fixed route, but a diverted route based on somebody needing the services, kind of like an Uber or Lyft transit service type thing. We also have great resources for van pools and carpooling that maybe residents just aren't even aware of. And I think sometimes when communities take it into their own hands to connect transportation resources and people set up more community-based rideshare versus getting on a sort of statewide network, there can be more interest and motivation there. So those are great suggestions to put on the list. Yes?
I think they're addressing the Route 30 corridor. The Route 7 corridor is another one, although there is transport from Rutland, I guess, to Bennington. I don't know how well that works, but I know it's available.
Yes. Another good resource.
Well, I'm on the Route 7 side too, and I think it's the same problem because I work north and the bus is going south.
Yeah.
And then I come south and the bus is going north. There's no way I can take that bus and
Right.
be at work on time. And I would like to suggest, as far as the carpooling is concerned, I used to carpool. That opportunity is no longer available. But I had to go to D&B, meet my carpool and so on. But we don't have a place to park our cars. Like if we wanted to do a community-based carpool,
Yep.
that's something I think the community might be able to work on. There might be some on the Route 7 side and on the Route 30 side parking space. So I know some small towns have that available, and I'm not aware that we even have that available.
So looking more at the park and ride resources that are available in Dorset and what needs there may be for, they don't have to be big park and rides, those small park and rides are often very effective. And so looking at that, and there is a grant program through the state to develop park and rides at the community level. So the resources are there. I think I saw a hand.
Well, Ellen, you should talk. Ellen Malloy can talk about Manchester is going through this process.
There is one park and ride, and it's a surprise to everyone because nobody knows it exists, and rightfully so. It's kind of quite hidden, but the energy committee wanted to get this moving, and are making plans to pave it and to have a shelter.
Yeah.
And but it's in Manchester. It's at the intersection of 7 and 11:30.
Okay.
And it will be. It's going to have curbs and everything. We've been working on it for 5 or 6 years, and our last estimate they stopped maybe in another 4 years. I made a bad noise when I said that. But we do have that coming.
Yeah.
The other program that you're talking about is one that's available for municipal land in particular, I believe.
Yeah.
And they do pave it,
Yeah.
which is not always necessarily.
May not be necessary, and it doesn't have to be paved. It can be paved, but it's really more of the community helping to plan what their needs are on their community properties.
But yeah, if there is that possibility, if you were to work on that, We take individual initiative, that's.
But remember, I go north, I don't go south. So I'm not going to Manchester to park my
I
car.
understand, but I need room to work on one for Dorset. There's room over, I think it has to be municipal land, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
owner control, yeah.
But, I have another, I don't know how many times I've been at the Albany airport coming or going.
Yeah.
And I see somebody that I know
Yes.
from the community. And if there was some kind of coordinated bulletin board or website or whatever saying, let's carpool.
A ride board.
Yeah, to the airport. I mean, the bus is great, but it doesn't always fit your time
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah.
And that just knowing somebody else is going in the same time frame that you are, it's,
Your township can have a bulletin board online to do that.
Yes.
There's no reason why not. At St. Paul's Church in Manchester, the rec center uses it for overflow, the parking lot. The student driver summer program uses it
Yeah.
because it's the biggest off-street area to start drivers on. My car got hit by one when I was doing volunteer work. The senior citizens use St. Paul's lot for parking all their cars while they get on a bus to take a trip. That's a huge parking lot, maybe the biggest one that's not belonging to a commercial complex in the entire town of Manchester. And if people were willing to park around the periphery away from the church so that there's no impact, there's room for people to use that. And in Dorset, the back parking lot during the week of the Dorset Church might be available because it's rare during the week, the work week when most people are driving,
Yeah.
that there's something going on during work hours, normal 8 to 5 work hours,
Right.
that would be unnecessary. The church could benefit in a small way
Yeah.
from a rental.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways to solve this problem if we really want to do it. But a lot of it also requires people to be pretty tech savvy. You're not going to connect with somebody on the internet if you're not hooked onto it.
Right. Yes. So those are good suggestions, and I think looking at creative ways to use the resources that are out there that are maybe underutilized, and that happens very frequently in other communities.
Our cars are underutilized even when
Yeah.
we use them every day. This building is underutilized. This is a public building. Where I came from in Pennsylvania, there were all kinds of adult ed programs going on in the night, and you paid a small tuition. You learned all kinds of new things. And I just see this building sitting here dead with all kinds of lights on at night for no reason.
So, and so you have your hand up.
Just kind of shifting gears a little bit. We have on the Route 30 side of town, our planning commission has been working on a little bit. Is that the village itself is fairly, it's dense enough and walkable,
Yes.
but we don't really have much infrastructure for that. And the potential to connect things that are walkable to keep people from getting in the car to drive to, the Green, to the Dorset Union, and then drive from there to the library, which is about 200 feet.
Yeah.
And to drive from there to the post office, which is about another 200 feet. But that happens because there's such a general lack of some infrastructure. So I think that's one obvious thing that we should need to work on.
Yeah, planning for community infrastructure for sidewalks and, bike lanes and or bike paths and on-road bike facilities in appropriate places, and encourage people to get out of their cars and take other options. So it's a good way to think about it. Yes.
On that note, like what Rob was talking about, we're trying to come up with a plan to have a bike lane along Route 30 that could eventually, it'd be walk path, bike path, eventually make its way down Route 30 up to Morris Hill Road, Mark's working on it, and then eventually then get into the Manchester bike path.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of connecting two communities. Maybe some people would ride to work, kids would ride to school, vice versa. Simplify that a little bit, or bring people into town to utilize the bike path.
It's great.
So
That's excellent. Yes.
Yes, this is an observation for not just of Dorset and Manchester, but for other areas that I've seen in Vermont, where you have a bike path along a major route. It's not particularly safe in many instances, and it's certainly not aesthetic. And so the need for looking towards the future, all right, real money into bike and walking paths that are separate.
Yeah.
Especially
Well,
self-use.
and I know I went, soon after I came here, a walking tour of historic homes here. And the fellow who was conducting it just was, after half an hour, he was amazed at, he said, I really hadn't heard it, the traffic. He couldn't be heard,
Yes, right.
you know?
Yeah.
And this ruins the atmosphere of a nice, quiet. So I
Absolutely.
don't know what to do about that. Definitely walking.
Electric car.
Give me one now, right?
So I think you hit on a good point that some people can and like to ride their bicycles on the road in the adjacent, area to the side. Some people don't, and so trying to figure out what kind of resources we need, what kind of resources we can afford. Right now the state invests about $13 million annually in bicycle and pedestrian facility investments, and there are grant programs and planning resources through Mark Shop, and your planning commission can take advantage of those and be ready for the opportunities when they come along. I think many communities have found they have to do these projects in stages and prioritize where those areas are that are going to get the most use. And so I think it sounds like you folks are on your way to working on that. Yes, Bill?
I'd love to see Dorset build out its electric vehicle infrastructure. And it seems to me that with the current legislation and the push by the state to get to more EVs, that there might be some funding opportunities for municipalities or nonprofits to be able to help do that.
So, so the point is, let's get more electric vehicle charging stations out there, so people have the confidence that if they own an electric vehicle, they'll be able to get to where they're going. I'll just make a couple of comments on that and a couple of suggestions in terms of sort of the direction things may be going. First, I think a lot of people, and I don't know if our Green Mountain Power fellow is here. Tell me your name again, Jeff.
Jeff
Thank
Margaret.
you. So I've been doing a lot of work with Green Mountain Power and other state agencies. Ken's been involved with this to administer grant programs for the Volkswagen emissions failures, which basically Volkswagen violated the law and let emissions be released into the atmosphere they shouldn't have, and so now we're have resources available, a portion of which can go to charging stations. And there have been a couple of rounds of grants for communities and other organizations to apply to get charging station infrastructure. The governor has a priority of having a fast charging station within 30 miles of all Vermonters. And so the next round of grants is really going to be focused on making sure we fill in that statewide network so that wherever you're traveling, you feel confident that you can likely find a fast charger near to where your travels take you. I think we're going to see more investment coming as we move forward in terms of beefing up the state's and the nation's charging network. I can't say right now where that money is going to come from. The VW settlement was a limited amount of money, but there's a lot of innovations on the horizon. I know there's a company that's working with Green Mountain Power, and we've had a lot of conversations with the state about building solar canopies that could be at your park and ride or your workplace that have a charging station as a part of it, as well as a battery, major size battery backup that's all connected to the grid, so that during times when the sun's out and the battery's charged and the power company needs charge for the electric grid, they can pull it off that battery. And then other times when there's excess energy in the grid system. They can store energy in that in the battery, and in the meantime, we're charging our cars as we go by. They're offering home charging stations for folks that are purchasing electric vehicles. Most of us who will purchase an electric vehicle will have a vehicle that has a range of probably 140 or 200 miles or more as we move forward, and so you'll be charging at home at night for almost all of your charging unless you're taking a trip somewhere, and then you'll want the fast charging station. You may be charging at work, but a lot of people will be able to get to work and back on a single charge. And so, you know, how we are strategically going to sort of fill in the big network and then do the infill and let people see, in Dorset we have a charging station, and I see vehicles charging there. I see my neighbor driving around in an electric vehicle. You know, think about that. We have incentives coming that the legislature authorized this past session for low and moderate income households to get an incentive to purchase an electric vehicle, and those can be matched with federal incentives and power company incentives. And so I think you're going to hear a lot more. We heard earlier in our last session that basically driving your electric vehicle is equivalent, on electricity, is equivalent to paying $1.50 a gallon or $1.25 a gallon for gas. And so there's like the household energy portion of this that makes sense too. So it sounds like maybe, you know, on the list that Bill is talking about for your ideas is charging stations and maybe more awareness of electric vehicle, you know, opportunities for households.
Can I ask a question? What is there publicly available charging in Dorset now?
That's a good question.
It's in the process.
We have one on our building that we let people use.
So it's a business. Your business. Is it a level 1 or level 2?
Level 2.
Is there another coming?
Yes, the Williams store
Yeah.
has installed gas pumps, which is a plus for this side of the Dorset.
Yeah.
And they will have electric charging stations as well.
Oh, great.
They're doing them there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So on the way. And the Energy Committee, has this been a conversation for you folks?
Yes, it certainly has, yes.
What about you attract so many visitors that my perception is you almost have to, when you attract visitors in this day and age, provide public. Are the inns, to your sense, doing it at this point, or is there other? I'm a little surprised if they're not, honestly.
I don't think there's any at the Dorset Inn or the Barrels House.
Okay.
So Cindy back there working at cleaning up is Dorset Union Store, which used to have gas pumps but no longer does, which is right on the Dorset Ring.
Yeah.
So I don't think she can hear us, but you know, but there are no grants. The grants for that kind of charging station would be municipal.
Well, there aren't any grants right now specifically being offered, but I think we're going to see, as we move forward, continued grants or incentives potentially through utility companies who want to, you know, there's a tremendous opportunity and benefit here for utility companies to sell you more electricity, to be honest, and it's a good thing. Because of the kind of low carbon opportunity the electricity that we happen to have in most of our grid provides.
So Green Mountain Power has an incentive. We'll provide $375 per. Green Mountain Power has an incentive. We'll provide $375 per port as an incentive for every public or workplace charger that gets installed. You can take that and couple it with if there's grant programs available, and it really shrinks the investment requirement to get a station set up.
Do you know if Williams Store has taken advantage of that?
I don't know.
I sent Billy the information when they were having that last round of grants
Okay.
for that. I don't know if he did that or not. New York State has an $8,000. They'll give you an $8,000 grant for a business to put up to $200,000 per business to put in a charging station.
Isn't that amazing? Like, where do they get their money?
Tax base.
So, yes.
Following up on the point you just made about attracting visitors and all that, this might be crazy, and I have no idea how much it would cost, but could we bring back some kind of limited train service between just Bennington and Rutland County that would run all the time, all day. People could jump on and off, people going north and then people going south. Just one engine and one car. Because I know, it comes through Dorset.
Yes,
We
it
have all
does.
these train tracks already in place.
Yes.
The train comes through at noontime and 5 o'clock.
Right.
And otherwise, it's unused.
Michelle, 15, 20 years ago, we spent something like $6 million repairing the tracks all the way from Rensselaer, New York to Manchester. We wanted to go to Rutland, and the legislature wouldn't fund it, and they wouldn't subsidize Amtrak to run. We could have had people from New York City up all winter long, not having to rent a car, not having to drive, not having to deal with the dark and the ice. And they spent $6 million and then wouldn't finish the job. So those tracks are probably not in great shape anymore because they haven't been used much, but it was started. There were car dealerships ready to be at the station down where Grabbers used to be in Manchester, renting cars, doing all kinds. There was so much in place. And when it came time for the legislature to make the hard decision, they didn't make the right one.
Isn't Dave Glittersdorf working on a rail project in Manchester? Not
In Manchester, I'm not sure, but
It's up north.
Up north. Yeah, it was.
This would have taken care of the
I'm sorry, not
west,
Manchester,
the west
Montpelier,
side
that's
of the
what I
state,
meant. Montpelier, yeah.
from New York City up. And it would have been a tremendous boon to business on the west side of Vermont. The east side's already got it.
Can I ask another question
But
from
these
an asset
assets are
standpoint,
Montpelier.
which is, what about taxi service or Uber? Like, if you do have visitors who
There are
don't want to
taxis.
drive their own car,
There
can
are
they
taxis.
get a, what is it like? Is it a good taxi? Is there Uber? What do you have for those resources?
There are two drivers in Manchester.
That's it.
two.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's recent, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting because
Are they also the taxi? There's one or two taxi services.
No, they're not the taxi.
so there's a little taxi service. There's it's interesting. Oftentimes in ski area communities, which is kind of in this area, you'll see more Uber and Lyft drivers, but that doesn't seem like it's come on yet. The train question, I think, is a perennial question that comes up, and the costs are very, very expensive. I think we're going to be delivering a study for the legislature about the potential of using sort of micro train service that's with its own self-propelled engine, just what the cost would be to upgrade the tracks between Berry and Montpelier to be ready to do that kind of train service, to better understand just what the infrastructure costs are. We've done a lot of studies in the state about the operating costs of these kind of small rail sets, and train service is wildly thought after, but not necessarily wildly sought after where it's available. We pay about $8 million a year just to have Amtrak service, not counting any work we do on the tracks or the bridges or anything like that. So it's, I think there's, in very dense areas, it is really super and it works great. But without the density, we're subsidizing bus trips on average about $8 per person in the state. The train subsidy, is multiple times that for every person that rides. So, it's just thinking about what's the right size transportation for your community, in your community to meet your community needs, and those of visitors coming here too.
Michelle?
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you late.
Oh, please.
But I'm sorry if I missed it, but the question of the rail service is like your second on around as long as I have. And that, so the last study that was probably the definitive study of the cost of service, it was, the full cost of the infrastructure upgrades was north of $100 million to bring rail service back up through this corridor with a $6 to $8 million a year annual subsidy, operating subsidy. So it was, but the idea was so good they're doing a lot of jobs. So credit to all the folks who pulled together and got it done. We got that.
Amtrak bus service.
The Shires Connector bus service that runs from Manchester to Bennington to Albany, direct, boom, boom, and it's pretty quick and efficient. It provides exactly the same connection that Amtrak would actually, and probably does it quicker and a whole lot cheaper. I think our big challenge is making sure that that service is fully taken advantage of, and to the point of Dorset, to make sure that it's as accessible to Dorset residents as possible.
Yeah, good point, Jeff. Thank you for those additional details.
Talking about this, planning this whole thing, several elderly people, mid-90s, spoke to me about not wanting to drive to Manchester to do their shopping alone all the time. Some of them are not able. Some years ago, we had a 108-year-old person just over the border in Uber who said, I should really stop driving. But my friends that are 10 years younger than I am drive worse than I do. She was the car. And but it's serious. There are many people of fairly advanced age in the town of Dorset who really appreciate the help of being able to get down. And if there could be some hybrid between on-demand and carpooling, but also a car service.
I think a lot of that too is app. Uber would be great, but they're not necessarily connected to an app.
So I think
also doesn't save energy. I mean, that's a trip.
But somebody's going to be driving, so or there's a taxi. That means they have to be on a cell phone.
Yeah. So this is a need that's been identified in many communities, and many communities have sort of approached it in various ways. The town of Heinsberg developed a program called Heinsberg Rides, where they had folks that were willing to be the volunteer driver, and then a call-in service, and the state has taken the opportunity to sort of set up call-in services for communities in cases where you want to establish something like this for people that don't or won't or can't use an app. It's not for everybody. So it could be, John was aware of a recent case where a community got the resources together to purchase a car, and then they got volunteer drivers, and they had some sort of ride board set up, enabled, and it could have been either on a regular basis. We're going to Manchester 3 times a week at 10 a.m. Or on a different basis. There's a lot of ways to set it up. And then when the car is not in service for these trips that are planned, it could be available as a car share within the community after hours, where anybody could sign up to use that car on a paid basis, paid per mile basis. And I believe that CarShare Vermont has helped some communities set up these sort of blended arrangements so that you have another transportation resource within your community. And so maybe you don't need 2 cars in your family or 3. Maybe you could use the CarShare car if you needed an additional resource. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that, and through the Go Vermont program, you can get references for what other communities have done.
Well, in the greater Manchester area, we have an organization called Neighbor to Neighbor.
Yes.
That takes care of a lot of the elderly, taking them to doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, whatever. And it's all volunteer run, and there is no organization-owned vehicle. People who are volunteers use their own.
Yes.
And they volunteer their time and their vehicle.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Another transportation need that we haven't talked about is businesses. That maybe have a product and they need to ship it. Where does it go? Do they do it by truck? How does all that work?
I think business people are pretty savvy, and there's a lot of businesses providing business transportation services out there that make themselves available. how many people here have shopped from Amazon online? You know, so.
Try making a complaint to Amazon.com. I don't shop them anymore.
Yeah, there you go. So.
And I like to see what I'm buying. I like to buy local.
Yes.
I like to touch and try on, and
Yeah.
I'd much rather support a human being I know than
The cloud.
some billionaire somewhere.
Your kind of vehicle sharing.
Yes.
You look out here at all the buses at the bottom of the hill,
Yeah.
especially the small ones.
Yeah.
Not used in the summer, not used on weekends. Isn't there any way to partner with the school district that, here's a little route to pick up people to go to Shaw's
Right.
on Saturday morning or afternoon, or in the summer, one day a week?
Yeah.
When your vehicle is there, I guess you need a driver who's licensed.
Yeah. School buses are such an anomalous thing in this country that so many of us have worked over the years trying to crack that nut in terms of sort of how you can better leverage those resources that are very, very underutilized. And because of the rules around school bus utilization and transit services, you can, in some communities, I know in Burlington, so long as you're picking up kids on a route that is a normal city route, those kids can take that city bus to school, and that the district can make an arrangement with the city bus to pay for those services. But you can't use a school bus to provide a transportation service where you have these roles. We have not been able to crack that nut federally or at the state level.
Can I ask another, though, now that we mentioned schools, I'm curious about a couple things. Like when we drove in here tonight, my coworker said probably not many kids biking or walking Is there virtually none given the nature of the transportation here?
6 kids.
Yeah.
6. Who live right in the neighborhood?
Some kids ride Route 30.
They do ride Route 30.
Well, and I always have to put a plug in for my side of town because my child rode into the high school. So that was I think it's
8 miles.
8 miles one way.
Wow.
After bike practice.
Yeah, and then he was on the mountain bike team too. But,
But it didn't happen during the winter time.
no, that's true. But so this might be a good segue. I know that you talked about the Route 30 and so on. I think that we don't have a bike path on the other side of town either. But to put signage up, especially when you go from Madtown Road south and you've got those, you got to go right, you got to go left, everything. To put signage up to make drivers aware that there might be a bicyclist on the road. I mean, they just have those triangular signs or whatever with bike picture on them. I don't know if that's something that the transportation department could help with. Because I did, even though he didn't do it in the wintertime, there's a lot of days that, there's not snow on the road, and that's what his mode, that was his choice. I want to say, as a parent, that wasn't, that was his choice. But it's still sort of scary when you think about it. He's going down Route 7, and everybody else is going to work, and who knows who's late, and, I did often think about, oh my goodness, this kid on a bike could be a surprise to some driver.
I know that many communities on their local road networks, and I saw several of them. I was in Bennington today at meetings and coming up through on the back ways. I saw a lot of share the road signage for biking and vehicular use on local roads. On state routes, because there would need to be so many of them, we don't have the resources to pay for putting up those kinds of signage on state routes. I think you'll find that if you have a state route going through a community and it's designated a Class 1 town highway and the community has put in maybe more enhanced bike lane striping or something, they might put those signs up on a state route. But typically you're not going to see it on the high.
But I'm assuming Route 7 is a state route.
Yeah, it is a state
And
route.
that's basically what we're talking about, is Route 7
Right.
South.
So that would be a route we probably wouldn't put that kind of signage up on, just because if we put it there, we'd have to put it all over the state, and we wouldn't have the money to do that.
Route 7 South, East Dorset, is limited access, and you shouldn't be on it
Yeah,
otherwise.
you can't.
Route 7A, yes. Route 7
7A, yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Well, right.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
Let me ask another thing about school transportation, just to get a sense of it. After students finish here, right, which is 8th grade, they go to Manchester, Burton,
Or
Long Trail School. Is there bus service from here to those, to both of those schools?
Yes.
Yes, so, okay, that's helpful just to get the lay of the land. right?
One's done by the school district, the other one's done by the school itself.
By the school itself, okay.
Yes, one of the things that might help from a standpoint of reducing our carbon footprint
Yes.
would be getting people to ride the school bus.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
there's a list of the lines,
Yes.
especially the parents idling their cars coming up this driveway, and it's
Mark
really
keeps
sad.
Mark keeps getting asked to solve the problem with all the traffic congestion and safety problems and all the people driving kids to school and kids driving to school. No, it's really going to be a big issue in all the schools.
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's one of the biggest transportation issues in our region. We have gotten calls from 2 of the regional high schools just this year, and boy, you go out, even in little neighborhood elementary schools, there's traffic jams around them now. And you kind of couple that with the childhood obesity epidemic, and you think maybe this should be a real focus of the state. And I think that, if you take a town and you make it really safe for kids to get around, it's going to be a much more appealing town for everybody. And I think we do a really terrible job of that. I mean, I was, for one of these reports, I was looking at the Netherlands, what they do in the Netherlands, and granted, that's not the Netherlands, it's a lot flatter. But they train kids from a really young age how to bike, and we realized in Bennington that a lot of kids don't even have bike anymore. Most middle school students don't know how to bike according to the PE teachers in Bennington. I wonder if that's true in Dorset.
I think you bring up a really good point. I was going to ask about that myself as the conversation was trending this way. I don't know if Dorset has done a safe routes to school. I mean, there's different program names for it now. There used to be a lot of federal programming, but the opportunity to sort of look in it, and it may not be biking and walking to school, it may be how do we get parents to maybe even just carpool with each other if you can't put your kid on the bus for whatever reason, and so I think that's something to be thought of and looked at on the list. There were a couple of
Exactly the same.
Okay, great.
I have 2 grandsons who live at the top of Dandry Mountain Road. The school bus won't go up Dandry Mountain
Yes.
Road. So their parents have to drive them down to the bottom. By the time they've done that 2 miles, they figure they might as well take them the rest of the way.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly. But Vermont is very willing to be counterculture in so many ways.
Yeah.
One of the ways I'd love to see Vermont buck the trend, what we have for biking paths, walking paths, and no sidewalks through so many of our communities don't really account for a genuine, safe biking path. They're simply not wide enough.
Right.
And yet we insist that our bikers and our walkers go with traffic. If you go against traffic, you can see a problem coming. If there's an impaired driver or an erratic driver or something, you've got a chance. If you're going with traffic, you don't have a chance. And I'd really like to see that change. When I was a child a million years ago, in my hometown in another state, we biked against traffic because it made sense.
Right. I'm not an expert as to why we chose that way, but we'll probably not take a deep dive on that tonight, but we've captured it.
Now, this probably wouldn't be economically correct or political correct, but what about charging parents a fee for the privilege of bringing their kids to school instead of going to the end of the driveway and letting them get on the bus?
There's an item.
Seriously, a lot of places are charging, bigger fees if you have an SUV, a little fee if you have an electric car, but, the buses just aren't used anymore.
So let's hear.
A little bit of, a rebuttal to the discussion about the kid. I literally drive by the school. Bus pickup is at like 6:55, and my kids will be on the bus for almost an hour.
Yeah.
Those are the reasons that they don't ride the bus.
Yeah.
The story about Dorset, I see way more people that, their careers are over, retired, drive to the supermarket in Manchester every single day.
Yeah.
And I working in town, you see those habits, and you see people coming and going. And I think so. My point is, I think the messaging about maybe not doing that, or maybe your neighbor does the same thing. Or you go to the grocery store every day,
Yeah.
so why don't you just team up and go together? So maybe
you can have Amazon delivery. By drone.
Hello Fresh or any of those. Save yourself the time. So I think resources and messaging around what is available, because people just maybe don't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's my, it's 2 o'clock, I gotta go to the grocery store.
Yeah, and then I saw.
40 or 50 years ago, it was reasonable to think of groups. My mother used to go to the grocery store once every 3 or 4 days. Now, it's way more than that. But at the same time, in today's society, where you have 3 kids, one's going to hockey, one's going to soccer, one's going to skating, and it's a year-round thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's going like this, and everybody is vying for a ride. And so you get in the car and do it. You really, by today's standards, don't have much choice.
Yeah.
I'll mention there's an energy accelerator program up in Burlington, and one of the businesses participating is building an app specifically targeted to parents and couples to facilitate. And actually, we're in this world in our life with camps every morning in the summertime. And if we were able to gather with other parents and share some of those rides, it would really spread that burden around. So there's some things coming that maybe will help ease some of that.
Other thoughts?
I just want to reinforce what Rob said, because I hear this in other towns too, about how long these school bus rides take.
Yeah.
And my question is sort of why? I mean, I took the school bus when I was a kid, not far from here, and it didn't take an hour.
Because they only want you getting on this, like in our case, it would have been the same. The kids would have had to ride out all the way almost to Danby to come back Morse Hill to go just a short section down Morse Hill Road to go to school.
So it's the routes, it's the way the routes are designed?
So, it was from our house to school was like 3 minutes, but they wouldn't have to ride all the way around that way. Now, coming home, they were like the first stop off.
So part of it's route planning. I mean, when I was growing up, it was the same thing. It was an hour ride to school, and
In this area, we have kids that are coming from over beyond the ski areas, from Londonderry, to go to the high school. Some of those kids are getting on the bus at 6:45 in the morning, and they don't get home until 5:15 at night. They go to school in the dark, they come home in the dark. They put in a longer work day than most of us.
When Rupert and Pollitt built their new school about 12 years ago, instead of building it dead center, they built it at the far end, as far out as they possibly could. Children at the other end, for preschool and kindergarten, were spending more time on the bus than they were in school. That's adult stupidity. Can't blame the kids for that at all.
so before I go back to Rob, Tom, did you?
I'm all set.
You're set. Okay.
But just on the resources, Long Trail School seems to bus kids from as far away as Rutland to get them to school. Buses, vans, whatever, but they seem to be all over the place with vehicles.
Yeah.
How full the vehicles are.
Burn Burton does too. Burn Burton has a bus. So Burn Burton is in Manchester, but that's one of our local high school choices. And I'm the one that goes north, so I'm going the opposite direction. But that Burn Burton bus, I know if I meet it in a certain spot, I'm either late or early. And they don't send a full-size bus. It is one of those van-sized buses. But interestingly enough, Long Trail and Burton do not combine that trip. They both have their own bus.
Yeah.
And how many places in Rutland can they be picking kids up? You know what I'm saying? It's like
insane.
Their carbon footprint is huge because they're not combining that bus. And I think Ethan did ride his bike to high school, but I had 2 other kids too. And one of the reasons that they rode their bikes was because we didn't have great transportation in East Dorset for the high school kids. Now, maybe we're off topic because, again, the school buses really aren't under the town's jurisdiction.
It's about the carbon footprint.
But I think, and that's a question for Rob, he may know, I think they did change that because I think now on the East Dorset side, it's actually a district bus from DNB that comes down, I'm just assuming it somehow comes down from DNB. And so the bus is going past our pickup point.
Yeah.
And so it stops now.
It stops at the store.
It stops at the store. So that's one of the other issues. It's kind of like coming down off
Danby Mountain Road.
Danby Mountain Road. So in East Dorset, everybody has to bring their high school kids out to the general store.
Yes. Right.
And there's a lot of people, a lot of families that's just not conceivable. I mean, you could drop your kid off on but we don't leave at the same time. And then, like, if you send your kid, you say, walk or ride your bike or whatever, there's no place to store your bike for the day.
Yeah.
And the mile, or I'm not familiar with where all the kids live now, but, some of those kids would have to walk a mile and a half, whatever.
By the time they become juniors in high school, they all have cars and drive themselves.
And they don't
see the
carpool.
parking lot at Burton.
Yeah.
Yes, and they don't
It's
carpool.
huge.
So I think, that universities have taken the approach that leave your car at home and, when you're on campus, you're going to have to make your way around with the resources here.
When I was in college, it was a lottery system.
Yeah.
Whether you're not, you could use your car.
And it'd be interesting to see if working with, so it sounds like there's opportunities for working with schools to think and families to think about transportation resources and liabilities, as it were, as we've been talking about. And, maybe, I know it's tough because all those kids that drive their cars to school, their parents don't have to get them there, sort of thing. And so that's, it's a tough trade-off in terms of what you do. Yeah.
What were you saying about energy accelerator? Or you said in Burlington, or what is that?
Well, it's just it's something run out of Burlington to help accelerate economic business around the country. And there's one particular business that's building an app to facilitate carpooling, and particularly carpooling among parents. Like that's their niche that they're really trying to fill. And so we're curious to learn more about it. Honestly, it's in development.
I think with a lot of things that this is about communication and culture.
Yeah.
So the more we talk and the more we bring in parents or people that like myself travel towards Rutland to work and so on, we have to kind of get the people together, talk, and then change the culture.
Yeah.
Because if we just talk with our next door neighbor, we don't sync up. It's like she goes south, I go north,
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
And so it kind of takes a community to communicate these changes. And we just have to take every opportunity we can.
It would also be good to work with large employers. My wife works at Vermont Country Store, and half the people there come from Rutland.
Yep.
So,
I know.
And that's where the
Because
Go Vermont program can help, get van pooling and ride sharing with businesses and basically trying to do transportation demand management activities to reduce the number of trips people are taking and to make those trips more efficient. I saw.
Well, you really have just kind of captured or summarized really why we're all here.
Yes.
To begin with. We picked 3 or 4 programs to look at. Transportation obviously being this one, but the point being we've got more people than we've ever had before probably discussing this issue, and we all deal with every day, and we could together we can figure out some. You're not going to solve it all, but we can make some drastic improvements. So I hope everybody, and as Paul did, you continue to come to these events so we can make some progress.
So I think the nuggets that we gathered tonight were great. We covered a lot of ground and a lot of areas of focus on transportation, and those notes will really help the steering committee to figure out how to sort of place those ideas into actionable items that folks can decide what they want to work on a first, second, and third basis. Are there any last nuggets anybody wants to throw out, or issues or concerns around transportation before we go to the visiting team?
We're all going to hop in our cars and individually go home.
No, I got 2 passengers.
You got you.
Nice job.
You should have picked up on the way.
Come out.
About driving, you talk about culture, but we're driving culture.
We're driving.
It's a rural place, you have to drive places. I think that a lot of it goes back to, where you talked about the messaging and communication around the latest technology with vehicles, making people aware that they're an option, making people understand how they work. I think that's probably something that doesn't take much investment to do, and to make people think about it. Because you're going to have to drive, you're going to probably have to buy a new car. That's I think the larger opportunity for areas like us.
Yes.
It takes just small steps. I mean, if one day you eliminated your drive or you picked up another person like tonight's deal, you're going to say it's, I don't know what kind of car you're driving, but pick up a truck, you're going to say probably close to a gallon, both directions.
No, I just drive by the school.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is, just think about what you can do. That little step
Incrementally
to do.
do. Yeah.
And we all have to remember too, the change starts with us. And if we just tweak the way we live, okay, I work 4 days a week. One of those days, I'm going to do my grocery shopping on the way home. I'm not going to take a separate trip out and back to do it. I do have to remember to have a snack before I go into the store, so I don't find But it's tweaking those things, and just really, the unexamined life is not worth living. We need to constantly re-examine how we do things, and it's not hard to make small adjustments that make a difference.
That's a really good point. Yes.
My husband and I just came back here 3 years ago from a big city where we had metro service.
Yes.
Now that we're driving everywhere, we put on weight.
Yes. I think of that every time I'm in DC. I'm like, I'm walking everywhere. This is so healthy.
So it's a health issue too we're talking about.
It is, and health and transportation is a big topic, a big policy topic. All right, so I'm going to turn it to Jeffrey. He might have a comment to add, and then he's going to add a reflection. We're going to go around to the visiting team.
Sure, awesome discussion. What I want to say is consider electric vehicles. They are practical. They shrink your carbon footprint dramatically. I drive a Chevy Bolt every day. I go everywhere in this state with it, and it serves me well. We're a good family to do that with because my wife has a gas-powered car, and when we need to go outside of the comfort zone, we use that one. The vast majority of my driving is within like a 30, 40 mile per day amount of driving. So the amount of charging that I have to do on any given day is very small. Most weeks I can drive the whole week without having to charge the car. So it's great, they're practical, they're cost effective, the maintenance is very low. Consider electric vehicles. And while we're at it, thinking about communities, consider electric buses, consider electric school buses.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Tom.
Just to kind of build on that, the idea of electric...
Speak up, stand.
Sorry, I speak softly. electric buses, I noticed throughout the whole discussion, nobody mentioned the bus at all. It goes from Rutland down to Manchester. I know they have a spur that goes up to Middlebury. They go out to Fairhaven, and from there down to my little town of Pulteney. I don't know how much harder it would be to do a spur from Manchester up to Dorset. I mean, they're already going through East Dorset when they're on their way back and forth. So I don't know. It's just a thought, but maybe doing a feasibility study of some sort through them to expand their coverage into this area.
Good point. Perfect. Mark,
Sure. And one.
you speak up.
Okay. And one plug, besides electric cars, there's a lot of, they're now called e-bikes. And I know Green Mountain Power is offering a $200 rebate on e-bikes. And they are so perfect for Vermont. I got a pedal assist e-bike and it's like amazing. Hills, no problem.
One of my coworkers at the Bennington Museum has had one for a month, and he raves.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yes.
Madison.
So I guess one thing that really struck me, I'm rather new to Vermont. In fact, I used to live in Massachusetts. And the number of trips people take regularly, and a lot of people who say, I want to carpool, and then it comes down to all these nitty-gritty reasons why, like, oh, today is not a good day, or this, that, and the other. And looking at the Go Vermont page, and there's so little use on it from what I've seen. If businesses got involved and said, hey, everybody just like put in what your regular schedule is, so that people can just connect and say, hey, would this be a good option for people? Because right now it's kind of up to the individual to find people, and there's so many of these apps and assets that we could take advantage of, but unless everybody's doing it, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ken?
I'm torn. There's two things I want to talk about, so I don't know how much time do I have.
Just a couple minutes.
Okay. First thing is the observation here is the chicken and egg thing, where in this case, chicken is all of the infrastructure, the specific options for transit, whether it be bus, whether it be rail, whether it be bike path, whether it be electric vehicle. That's one thing. And then there's egg, there's demand. And when I think of these community projects, I think the community has more of a role in the egg piece, cultivating the discussion so that the town of Dorset has that sort of oomph behind it so that the chickens recognize that Dorset is a place to make new eggs, to build that demand. So that's observation one. Observation two, the Transportation and Climate Initiative. She's grimacing. Because it's a multi-state activity. It's in the proposal stage where the gasoline and diesel consumption is going to be subject to an auction at the very regional, multi-state level. Okay, so that the end result is going to be, if this proposal follows through, and multiple states are working on it in the Northeast, will be an increase in the cost of gasoline and diesel, where the states receive the auction proceeds, which is really the interesting piece here. The state of Vermont, if it participates, will then have some resources in order to finance some chickens. So keep your eyes open as this discussion gets cultivated. The solid proposal will be in December for the multiple states to roll out, and then it'll be in the legislative discussion in 2020 about whether Vermont participates. But anyway, keep that in mind. Keep your eyes open for the Transportation and Climate Initiative. Is that okay, Michelle?
Yes, that's great. I'm on actually the leadership team on this multi-state effort, and this is analogous to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, and you can look that up online and read about it, but this is specific, as Ken pointed out, to the reducing carbon in the transportation sector. It's a pretty big idea, so we'll see where it goes.
And notice how I tied the chickens and eggs
I
together?
love the chickens and the eggs.
So basically you're raising the gas tax, in a nutshell.
No, wait, we'll never see those words.
So you're raising the gas tax, so everybody's going to pay more.
So I think
So is that going to slow us down?
This is where we say,
What would slow us down is if we had a war in the Mideast and gas went to $6 a gallon. That proved out 25 years years ago when everybody went to small vehicles and everybody got rid of their big gas guzzlers. But now gas is down around $3 a gallon. Everybody's buying big
So
vehicles.
are you saying Dorset should incite war in the Middle East? Is that
So I know Ken opened a very broad topic. I would say it's really not like a gas tax. It's more like a permit to release carbon emissions from your vehicle. And how are we going to reduce the amount of emissions we get from your vehicle and mine into the atmosphere by trying to incentivize other things like driving electric vehicles, having more charging, and basically reducing the interest and the ease people have in emitting carbon through transportation. So I'm going to leave that one there because that will have plenty of opportunity to fade and turn it over to Jim.
So yeah, we'll be engaged in that.
Yes.
So there'll be opportunities to have that discussion in our regions. Yeah, a couple things based on what people said. First of all, recognizing where Dorset is located and where a lot of the trips go, it reminded me of another meeting I was at recently in Winhall, where people were talking about the same kind of issue and the connectivity to service centers in Manchester particularly, and same lack of connection. And it seems like a great opportunity to have a conversation with our regional public transportation provider about let's take a look. There seems to be a need, there seems to be a demand, and there's something we can do. So I think that's something to look at in the short term. Just to throw out, we haven't talked about it much, but a couple people, I think Rob said, people go out and they make their daily trip to Manchester to the store. Think kind of upside down on it and say, are there services or businesses that maybe could happen in Dorset? So people maybe wouldn't have to drive to Manchester every day, they could drive someplace or walk someplace locally. So, that's not easy to, say, well, let's just conjure up a new general store or market in Dorset. But, that's the kind of thing that can actually have a real big impact if we start thinking about where those uses are relative to where people live.
Thank you, Jim. That's great. Haley.
Yeah, it was a really interesting discussion with a range of kind of, small, tangible ideas that you can probably implement tomorrow, and then really big ones that are going to take several years. But I would perhaps just encourage you to think of it that way. Think, starting tomorrow, you can use front form and say, I'm going to the airport on Friday. So that's something really small and so you can do right away. And then, have that first longer-term goal. I really liked what Susan said about communication and culture, because I think that, we are a car culture. We don't have to be, maybe we can be a hybrid at least and introduce more other modes of transportation, even though we're probably all going to need to use a car at some point. And then as far as the school buses, I don't know if this would work if the roads are too rural, but people talk about it being probably too dangerous to bike on Route 7 or Route 30. If students ever bike on their more rural roads to common pickup locations on the busier roads, and hopefully that would shorten the bus route as well. Or I know some schools, my elementary school in rural Vermont had actually 2 bus shifts because we only had 1 school bus. So it cut down the time, because that seems like something that could certainly reduce traffic, and we can maybe think about ways to make that bus route more efficient.
I'm going to pass over John because you guys do a lot of talking to me. So Laura.
Okay, so I have actually a couple of resources for you. One, I worked for the school in Rutland on an island, and one of that projects was we turned it into an engineering project, and the students actually solved it. They were in all the meetings with the city folks. They brought down local motion and did a pop-up demonstration. Where they put in, they redesigned both Kennington Avenue and their school parking lot in order to create safer places. And they changed the parents' routines. It wouldn't have gone as well if it came from adults. It just wouldn't have. But Local Motion is a resource, and you brought up e-bikes, but they do that e-bike lending library. So if you want to get more converts, that could be like if you do an event to do the e-bike lending, because once you ride them, you're sold. They're so fun. And then the other piece that I was thinking about too is Currently, the e-bus request for qualifications has been released, and so Bennington Rutland Supervisory Union is eligible for that. So you could, if you meet the qualifications, you can get 2 electric school buses for your district.
That's through the Volkswagen Settlement Fund.
That is through the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. That is due August 15th. That proposal, that request for qualifications is due August 15th. And that's another piece. And so, and I would just say that certainly helping using some of these challenges with your school as engineering challenges. Like seriously, this is what HVAC, this is what public planners do. And teachers are looking for ways to engage their students in authentic learning opportunities. You name a bunch of them. And better still is we'll end up with youth who become adults who don't want to drive 7 times.
Thanks, Laura. And Local Motion is a statewide bike and pedestrian advocacy agency that does a lot of technical assistance for communities.
So I guess I took away a couple of different things. I can't be as much of a resource with Efficiency Vermont in the transportation world as I can with energy efficiency. But Drive Electric Vermont, Vermont Energy Investment Corporation is the overhead to Efficiency Vermont. We have consultants as well under that umbrella, and Drive Electric Vermont is one of those consultants. So Dave Roberts is a great resource if there's folks that want to do, like in the Upper Valley, we have a electric vehicle expo, because the idea is when you go to a dealership, they have one EV, so you have to go to like 12 dealerships to test out what EV you want, versus have an expo, all of those dealers are there, you can test all of them in one go. The piece that sparked my state representative transportation side was the microtransit pilot. It's really cool. I'd love to talk more about that with folks. And then the walkability of downtowns. I live in White River Junction, and I can walk to my co-op, to my pharmacy, to my bank, and back to my house in 10 minutes. And I don't drive when I get to do that. So if there's ways that we can facilitate a conversation around a walkable downtown, I'm happy to do that with a few different hats on.
Thanks, Becca. I'm going to put a second plug in for Drive Electric Vermont. They have an awesome website that is an amazing resource if you're thinking about an electric vehicle for yourself. So, great resource. All right, that is our evening. Thank you all so much for your participation, for hanging in. Travels home.
The golf season is in full swing, and we're excited to have Corey Mears and Eddie Lewicki of the Richards Group co-chairing this year's golf tournament to support Battenkill Valley Health Center. Held on September 16th at the Equinox, we look forward to seeing you there.
I hope that other local businesses will consider one of the sponsorship opportunities available and join us in supporting BVHC.
And I hope folks who enjoy playing golf while supporting community nonprofits will book a foursome.
So keep swinging this summer and come out and join us on September 16th at the Equinox. Woo-hoo. See that, Eddie?